Era.
Have you any hobbies?
My hobbies are fast cars and fast women.
Hobbies are healthy. They teach you things. Are you ready? Are you ready?
Welcome, everybody, into Around the UFL. This is James Larson with Pro Football Newsroom, and we've got a special exclusive interview tonight. I've got the privilege of being joined by Brian Woods, former president of the Spring League and the USFL, and now the founder of the Pro Showcase. Brian, how are you doing today, man?
Doing great, James. I really appreciate you having me on this evening.
Absolutely. I appreciate you joining me and taking the time. This is going to be a fun conversation. You've had quite the history, quite the journey in the alternate spring football space so far, but you took a few years off. You know, I know you had a no clause with Fox Sports and the USFL, and can you kind of take us through what you've been up to the last few years and just, getting through? I know you did some stuff with the prep, with the high school and things like that. What have you been up to?
Yeah, I really have been very entrepreneurial, as you know, in this space for the better part of the past decade. And, when I departed Fox after I'd gotten the USFL off the ground the first season, we'd had some early success, and I was just kind of ready to move on. I was the consummate entrepreneur, if you will. And so had an opportunity. I saw some things happening in the high school and college landscape, and I knew if I left the USFL, I couldn't do anything in the pro football space, let alone the pro football development space for a few years. And so, I've been trying to nationalize high school football. That's been kind of my latest project, because I do believe if, college sports has become kind of the new realm of professional sports, and there's a lot of, media dollars flowing through college sports these days. I really believe that if you could aggregate the very best high school competition through some of the best high school football programs, that there could be some real media value behind that. So that's a project I've been working on. We've done some things in the spring development space, if you will, including some states and bringing some 4- and 5-star athletes onto, all-star teams, if you will, in the springtime. But my passion always has been and will remain to be kind of in the pro football development space and developing players. And that has, was the catalyst for me getting the Pro Showcase going again, which is kind of as you pointed out in some of your earlier articles, kind of a follow-up, if you will, to the Spring League. But I'm back in a good spot here and really excited to, provide more opportunities for these free agent players that are well deserved.
You set me up for my next question, talking about that void when it comes to developmental football. And of course, there's leagues like the UFL, and you have the CFL up north and overseas. And these leagues do a good job developing players, but there's kind of lacking that platform like the Spring League for these guys to really get some, current game film, go down there and really be developed and coached. Could you kind of talk to me a little bit about what inspired you to not just return to this space, but to launch the Pro Showcase and get this thing off the ground again?
Yeah, quite frankly, since we exited, in late 2021, when I sold the Spring League to Fox Sports, no one has really been in the space since that time. And I do still see a void there, a critical void, which is what you just alluded to. There is no platform out there where a player can go, very similar to like an NFL mini camp, an NFL training camp, where they're going to continue to get repetitions in a live, what I call a real football context environment, 11 on 11. It's going to be padded. It's not a t-shirt and short workout. It's not a combine. It's a place that NFL teams can come to and actually evaluate players and see them up close in person. And as I always tell a lot of players that participate and have, participated in the Spring League in the past and will now be, players that come to the Pro Showcase, once you move on from your last NFL opportunity, whether it was, you were lucky enough to go to the combine or you got drafted or you were signed as an undrafted rookie free agent, once that NFL draft window or your draft class is quote unquote expired and you've been released from an NFL team, it's what have you done recently, right? So a lot of these guys will get released from a team, and if they're not signed immediately back, or if they're not signed by another, alternative football league, they lose relevancy each day that they're no longer participating. And so, what the Pro Showcase offers, and we will strategically have these Pro Showcases throughout the year at specific times. And I think what we found this year was one of the first windows we wanted to jump into was in the fall, right after the trade deadline, when you're into week 9, week 10 of the NFL season, the natural attrition starts to take place. Where are you going to pull guys from? You're going to have to elevate guys from your practice squad. You're going to have to bring older guys in from off the street. So here's a place where you can come and really evaluate players. And we were fortunate enough to have 4 NFL teams on site, which was 3 more than we ever had at a Spring League showcase. That's the reality. Wow. So we would do these showcases with the Spring League, and we would have good players there, but we never had more than one NFL team at 10-day showcase. We'd have more scout presence at our league, but with these smaller 3- and 4-day events, the most NFL presence we ever had was 1. So having 4 there was really significant. And actually, there should have been more there, but because of all the issues that were happening with the flights leading up to the Pro Showcase, it was fortunate we probably had a few more teams that would have been on site, and we looked to, build upon that.
Yeah, and talking about those NFL scouts being there, like, I can't tell you how many events we see where they're like, oh, come to our event, we'll make sure this gets in front of NFL here or there. But, like, for you to be able to present this to players or player agents and tell them, not only are your players going to be practicing in pads, right, getting film and tape that's going to be practical for them in NFL teams watching them get back onto the field, but also they're there in attendance too. Like, I mean, that must be a great selling point for you with the Pro Showcase to set these guys up for, this isn't a money grab, right? Like, this is actually an opportunity for these guys to get back to the playing, whatever league that might be.
Yeah, so what you really touched upon a valuable point there, because this is where scouts can actually be, okay? 1, if you're fortunate enough to go to the NFL Combine, they're going to be there. 2, there's the All-Star circuit every year, but that's for a draft eligible player. Once you have been with an NFL team, once that draft eligibility has expired, there really is no place that you're going to go and see an NFL scout or have a pro scout evaluate you up close in person unless they bring you in for a private workout, right? So if someone says, I'm putting on a combine and there's going to be NFL scouts there, absolutely, that is fictitious. And I'll tell you why, because the NFL, with their agreement with their teams, they're not allowed to attend a combine that's not operated by the NFL. So they can't attend third-party combines. So the Pro Showcase is a very unique format. We're not a combine, so NFL teams can come to it. And then again, they're going to see players up close in that real football context. So this is, again, something we look to build upon in terms of the number of NFL teams that are on site, but it's also a very valuable platform to actually have that in-person attendance, not to mention that immediately after our event was over with, the film was uploaded so that every NFL team could access it. We have since forwarded it to the UFL, and we intend to send it to the CFL and other alternative football leagues that request it.
I'd be curious now that you had your first event down there in Miami last week, and looks like event went very well. Could you tell us a little bit why, like, how did you accomplish that event last week, and why is the Pro Showcase the premier developmental football platform for these players?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, and this is not to come off sounding a little bit arrogant, but look, I've been doing this for quite some time. So the Pro Showcase was really what we used to do with the Spring League and the showcases we had from 2017 to 2021. And again, since we hadn't been out in that space in a while, it took a little time for me to kind of educate the new agents and some of the players like what this event was going to look like. And so this was one of several showcases that I put on just under a different name. And so I've had quite a bit of experience in terms of structuring them. We had a lot of trial and error with the Spring League, and we were able to take that knowledge and expertise and put it into, we kind of know what the mistakes were in the past. And so we have a format that we think works perfectly. And that is, the players come in day one, we have 3 practices, they do film sessions in the afternoon, they have a scrimmage game on the final day. And that 4-day format seems to be just perfect in terms of getting these players an offensive and defensive scheme. We don't try to overcomplicate things, but the format and the duration of it seems to be ideal. And it's also a situation where, a lot of these free agent players, they have jobs, right? So they can't, unless somebody's coming to them and saying, we're going to pay you X amount of dollars to play professional football for us, they have to continue to work. And so that time frame tends to work pretty well, where they can get a few days off of work, attend it. We actually had an active Army person come to the showcase in Miami. And
was that Luke Ford? I think
it was
or?
Luke. Yeah, it was Luke. And I told Luke, first and foremost, when he said, I'm a tight end, Luke had been in a few camps, but I told him, if you come to Miami, I want to see you work inside a little bit, try to play some tackle. And so he was really accommodating in that respect, and took some reps on the offensive line. But again, I think the format is ideal. And again, there's nothing else out there like it right now. Since we left this space with the Spring League in 21, it's been quite void. And so now we're back with the Pro Showcase. And I think very quickly we'll be able to, I'm expecting to see a number of the guys that we had in Miami signed to futures deals over the next several weeks, once those contracts become effective.
Definitely, and we got a good question here from Jaron Horton, who you're probably familiar with, defensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Maulers when you were there in the USFL.
Sure.
About who coaches these pro showcases, and I know you mentioned Bart Andrus was running the offense, and to have quality guys like him in place must help a lot when you're trying to install stuff very quickly. Like you said, you've only got a few days.
Yeah, I really kind of leaned on some of the guys I had used in the past because they're used to that format and they understand they can't overcomplicate things. I mean, Jerry Glanville was there running our defense. Okay, so we bring in some guys that really know the offense and really know the defense, and great people. And I got to tell you, for an 83-year-old man, I told Jerry, I said, you don't look a day over 60. And his energy level, I hope I have his energy level at the age of 83, because this guy is an incredible human being, and he loves coming to these types of things. And he saw a lot of great players. He said, Brian, there's a lot of players here that should be on NFL teams right now. There are a lot of players here that the UFL should look to sign. So I think, and we did have a current UFL coach there working with our receivers, Mike Jones. We also had
Birmingham Stallions.
That's exactly right. We had Mike Jones there working with the receivers. And we had a gentleman there, and I apologize because his name escapes me here for a moment. We had a gentleman there that is a current coach in the CFL. And so not only did our players have access, and not only was the event attended in person by NFL scouts, but we also had representatives from the UFL and CFL community coaching these teams. And that is one of the reasons why one of the players got signed almost immediately to the Ottawa Red Blacks, because he was on the negotiation list, and the coach very quickly pulled him aside and said, hey, let's try to put something together here. So, I look for really good teachers and instructors and people that understand the format. And I think we had a great staff, and, the staff will change based on location. We'll be in LA in February, and I intend to bring in people like Norm Chow and the like, and people that are based in the Southern California area to work that camp.
No, I mean, all that networking, that's exactly how you got to run these things, and to have that diverse background from NFL, CFL, and UFL coaches all there helping out. I mean, like we said, giving these players a platform, what more can you do? I mean, that's the platform right there. I published an article earlier today with some of your help, on some of the guys that stood out from the camp, and I know some of our audience probably haven't read that yet. So, would you want to break down maybe a couple players that really stuck out to you through that few day process?
Yeah, it's, there was around, we carried around 84, 85 guys there in Miami, and there were a number of players that stood out. So I might forget a few names, forgive me. But I would say the ones that were right at the top of the radar were in the defensive back category. We spoke about this earlier, but Jeremy Lucian out of Vanderbilt University, and I believe he had been on a practice squad a year, 2 years ago. Looked really good. And as a matter of fact, the Falcons scouts pulled me over to the side at one point and said, hey, Zero had a great practice yesterday. And I said, well, he's having another good one today, obviously. But he stood out. Great player and a guy that I think will get signed back hopefully very quickly. Rotarius Torrance, the cornerback, big, tall cornerback out of Arizona State. I think he was on the Bears practice squad during the 24 season. I would be surprised if he's not signed back, or at a minimum gets picked up by a UFL team or something of that nature. But there was another, Demetrius Ford, another Arizona State kid. On the receiver side, we had Travian Pratt out of Morgan State, really stood out. We had another receiver there that I believe on his pro day, I'd mentioned this to you, on his pro day, he had run a 4.37, and for whatever reason kind of slipped through the cracks and didn't get an opportunity as an undrafted rookie free agent when the draft concluded this past year. But a kid out of San Jose State who stood out, made some plays, big, tall, strong receiver. We had Jonathan Kim there, and he performed well all week long and as a kicker. He had been with the Bears just this past training camp. So those are 3 or 4 or 5 guys rather. But a number, again, it's by position, there were quite a few guys that really stood out. And, when I put something like this together, I'm looking to find maybe 10, 15, 20 guys out of maybe 90. And I think we very well could have 20 to 30 of these guys that will end back or will finish up with a professional team before the end of the year, or at least, whether it's UFL, NFL, maybe even European or CFL. We had a D lineman there from Oklahoma. I was, Isaiah Coe,
Yeah.
And I spoke to Jerry Glanville yesterday, and he said that this player had the best rip move he's ever seen, and that's saying something coming from Jerry Glanville around some of the defensive all-stars he's coached over his many years of in the profession. So again, a number of really solid players that stood out. I know I'm probably forgetting a few guys here and there, but those were some of the guys in the top of my mind.
I'd be curious to get your opinion on this because we talk a lot about how the Pro Showcase is very similar to the showcases you were doing with the Spring League several years back, and then the Spring League kind of evolved into being more of an official league for a couple of years there. You played a couple seasons, but is there anything that the Pro Showcase is doing differently than the Spring League? Like, is there anything you've refined, or is it pretty much the same setup?
Yeah, what I would tell you is we're trying to get better at everything we did before. So we kind of learned a little bit from some of our mistakes. We're trying to be more efficient in terms of how we operate. We definitely want the best of the best. So, we had never worked with Catapult before in terms of our video system. And Catapult is the video system that all the NFL clubs are using. And so we worked with them this time. And I think we're going to continue to use them going forward as a way to integrate the film almost immediately so NFL teams have access to it. And it's a very seamless process. But I think it's just, learning from some of the things that we did earlier, what worked, what didn't work. And then, quite candidly, when the Spring League started, it started as an actual development league that would run for 2 to 3 weeks. And quite frankly, James, that just wasn't sustainable. And so I've got some very strong opinions on what works and what doesn't work in this alternative football space. And so I have to find something that works for us, something that is sustainable, and something that will continue to stay out there and provide opportunities for the well-deserved players, and there is many of them. Okay, this year I think a record number of undrafted rookie free agents made opening day rosters, a higher number than they've seen in probably over a decade. Why is that? Well, I'll tell you why that is. The scouting process is not infallible. They miss players all the time. So the idea that the UFL isn't missing on players or the CFL isn't missing on players would just defy logic, right? So there's a number of deserving players out there. And look, football in this country, it's the very best in the world, right? And there's way more talented players than there are roster spots. Obviously, the UFL seeks to assist in that regard, but there's still, as you know, there were 2 leagues that were operating there for a season or two. Those leagues merged, and then there were 8 teams that effectively dissolved. And where do those guys go, right? And those were quality players. A lot of those guys really quality players. So we want to be able to assist those type of guys, and we want to give them a platform where they can remain relevant and they can get current film. They can continue to get repetitions. I mean, in some ways, we can operate outside the NFL CBA, which we do. As you know, the NFL has a practice squad, and they continue to augment that practice squad. But here's the problem with the practice squad. The quarterbacks don't see a live pass rush. The offensive linemen don't get enough contact. So looking at that even as a developmental platform is quite flawed. Okay, there's a development problem. And it starts at the NFL, and it goes all the way down to high school football right now. And the transfer portal is part of that issue when players are moving from one school to another every 9 months at the detriment of development. And so what is the NFL getting? They're getting a very, very unfinished product. They're getting a player that's not, let alone physically not ready. They're not emotionally ready anymore to play the game. And so there needs to be something, even if it's a platform that we offer in a condensed format, that will continue to give these players the live repetitions they need in a real football context. And that's what I'm so excited about with the Pro Showcase.
We got a good question here, which is one I was actually going to ask, but we got it from an audience member. Which player are you most excited to see still playing that was at the Spring League, years back, whether they're still playing in the NFL or CFL, UFL? Are there any names that come to mind for you?
Oh, geez. I mean, that's a good question. And not knowing, you could probably tell me some of the names right now. You probably know better than I do, following
I mean, hey,
guys.
Kavontae Turpin's one of them, right? I mean,
Kavontae Turpin is
the Sea Lions back there. I mean, that guy played in probably every single alt league to exist.
That's exactly right.
And
so
that is honestly, that's a story I go back to all the time, because if that guy didn't just grind his ass off to play in the Spring League and the USFL, he went overseas, he played in the ELF, he played in the Fan Control Football League that went on there for a little bit. Like, these guys, they just need a platform, right? And that's where the Pro Showcase can come in.
Well, I was, again, maybe being a little arrogant here, tooting our own horn, but the one thing that I mentioned to people with the first year of the USFL, I still have coaches come to me that are no longer, in the new merged league, and they say, you know what? We feel like the best product was USFL 2022. And I don't necessarily disagree with them. And one of the reasons why I think it was so good is that a number of those players we had taken through basically 2 condensed seasons in less than a year. We did the Spring League in the fall of 2020, and then we came back pretty quickly and did another league in the spring of 21. And a lot of those players, maybe about 100 of them, ended up in the USFL. And so these players were quite refined. These players had not been sitting on a couch for 18 months.
Right.
And so I always felt like the product looked best in that first year because we were able to take guys that were battle ready and plug them right in.
A guy that comes to mind is like Sal Cannella. Right?
Sal Cannella, perfect example.
I mean, he played 2 years, I think, with you guys in the Spring League, goes to the USFL, and then he was in the XFL, and he's been one of the UFL's top tight ends, and now he's on the Browns practice squad. So, I mean, sometimes it might take 5 years to get there.
Well, I will say this, too. We had a few players down in Miami, and maybe it was just me wanting to have a reunion with some of these guys and being a little selfish, but we had a few players in Miami that were Spring League guys. And I'm talking Spring League guys from 2017.
Wow.
One of those players was Paul Butler. And I'll tell you the story of Paul Butler. Paul Butler was at our very first showcase. We had the Spring League earlier that year. And then we did and this is when we were still trying to figure things out. We did basically a week-long showcase in California. That ended up being way too long. Not sustainable, not something we want to do, not repeat that sort of format. But during that time, the Raiders came to that showcase. And they saw Paul Butler at the weigh-ins, and they started asking me questions, and they watched him play. And they said, Brian, who is this kid? And I said, it's Paul Butler. He played, I think, I want to say Indiana University of Pennsylvania, a school that most people have never heard of, right? But the interesting thing was the Raiders didn't even have this kid in their database. They knew nothing about him. Before you know it, they're inviting him to minicamp. They're impressed with him. They invite him to training camp. Next thing you know, he's on their active roster. He was from parts unknown, and the Raiders didn't even have him in a database. And so it's success stories like that I really thought the Spring League was made for. And now we can continue to, produce and have more of those success stories with the Pro Showcase, hopefully.
And, shifting gears, because you brought up the USFL, which is something I want to talk a little bit about. What was that transition like for you, where you built the Spring League from the ground up, and then you got Fox Sports involved, and we talked about those couple of seasons that you had, games were broadcasted, and then all of a sudden, the Spring League was like, it wasn't a full-fledged league, but it was close, right? I mean, it's not like you
Sure.
had fans in the stands and like whatnot, but it operated like a league. What was that transition like to go to the USFL, where all of a sudden you had 8 teams, and you did have fans at the games, and it was a little bit more of like a full-fledged league with salaries and contracts and all of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I mean, look, it was exciting. And I think to me, it was like a dream come true to be able to oversee a league of that stature. But by the same token, we also had all 8 teams in one market. And so I was familiar with that setup because this is what we did with the Spring League. And during COVID, I felt
Yeah.
like, we were the league that was built for COVID. And that's really how Eric Shanks and I got connected, because when COVID was happening and everybody was effectively shut down, I had an idea to do a league out in Las Vegas. And I wanted to do it at that time, include maybe some of these graduating college seniors. And we ended up trending on ESPN that day as one of the top stories. And before I know it, I'm getting a call from Eric Shanks. And at that point in time, they were pretty sure that the Big Ten was not going to play that fall. Eric called me that day and said, the Big Ten won't play this year. The SEC will be announcing in the next couple of days they won't be playing football. And we all know that never happened, that football was too big in the South to make sure that, so they kept it going. But there was still real interest in what we were doing. And he was familiar with the Spring League because we had done some rules testing for Fox and the XFL 2.0. But it was a lot of fun for me. I enjoyed it. And quite frankly, probably my proudest moment and the happiest day for me was sitting up in the box, and I had my Graham, my younger son at the time, who was only 2 years old, sitting on my lap, and we had an HBCU band out there, a drum line, really getting the crowd fired up before the opening kickoff. And then we had a great, had it not been for the weather that day, it was crazy because it was kind of there were some storms in the area. People, I think, were maybe apprehensive about coming to that game. And then right before kickoff, everything cleared up. And before you know it, the upper decks were starting to fill up. And so that was our best attended game, was our very first game. It was a well-played game.
Spiritual experience.
It was really
us.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was really pretty cool to have the Generals there from New Jersey, and, the Birmingham Stallions as kind of the home favorite, obviously. But it was exciting. But after
Down to the
that,
wire, man. I think about that J.M.R. Smith touchdown at the end.
That's
Every so
exactly
often.
right. It couldn't have. We couldn't have scripted it.
And you had
better.
Luis Perez in there, Spring League veteran, throwing the first touchdown.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So
Yeah.
for me, it was a lot of fun. But I got to tell you, after that first game, I don't want to say it went downhill from there, but it was a long. It was We were at the top at that point, and it really started to drain me because I was away from my young children. I basically spent, those 6 months in Birmingham. I would get home to see them maybe once every 2 weeks. And it was a long season. I would talk to Daryl and Doug and some of my guys in the football ops staff. And I said, guys, we don't get a day off because we work 5 days a week. And then the games were on Saturdays. And then we were having double headers and we were playing on Sundays. And so we were working 7-day weeks. And so it was fun at the beginning, and it was really fun at the end to get to that culmination in Canton, Ohio for the semifinals and the championship game. And it was a lot of excitement for me. But at the end of the day, I really do love living in this space where I know it's sustainable, and I know we're providing opportunities for players that want to play professional football, and I want to give them that opportunity. So.
And speaking about that sustainability, and we can wrap things up here shortly, but one of the questions I want to ask you was, you've been in this space for a long time, and you know a lot of things, you've seen a lot of things, and the UFL right now in the States, it really is a spin-off of what the Spring League and the USFL turned into, right? USFL and XFL merge, and it's probably our best chance to have spring football be sustainable here in the States, but there's no guarantee. From your perspective, what are some of the things this league needs to do to ensure that they are sustainable moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's really kind of somewhat of a conundrum, right? Because I think when you're trying to exist as a standalone professional football league in the United States, and I've always believed this as well, taking a step back for a moment, if you're going to start a sports property in the United States, you don't have to be the best in the world, but I think you have to be the best in the U.S. And so I think part of what the UFL and any alternative football league struggles with is that the label they get immediately. It's like the old adage, it's neither fish nor fowl, right? And so I think immediately you're going to be perceived as inferior talent because you're not the National Football League. When they see you take players that can't make NFL rosters, I think there is, that labeling that you will get. So I think you have to kind of figure out what you want to do. If it's a made for commercial league, which is what I thought we were trying to do with the USFL and Fox, and I had really strong ideas that, we were going to go into the transfer portal, start taking kids out of the transfer portal after our first season of the USFL and really get aggressive in our talent procurement if we were going to stick around and be relevant. The old USFL of the 80s challenged the NFL, and that's why they got the audience and the viewership, and they got the sort of attendance they got. People saw that as a professional league. I grew up in the Tampa Bay area, and the Bandits were better than the Buccaneers, hands down, okay? And so I remember those days, and that's what I was trying to recreate with, USFL 2.0. Modernly speaking, in terms of how the UFL is trying to position themselves, I think, Mike Rapoli has got some unique and interesting concepts. I think part of making the perception a little better, let's get into smaller stadiums where the optics look a little better. But then I question going into markets like Louisville and Columbus, does that start to diminish your viewership because you're not in the bigger markets and you're a good distance from the bigger markets? So I think it's a little bit of a challenge. I think you have to kind of figure out what you are. Are you a standalone league? Are you a D league? But if you're a D league, you better hope somebody's subsidizing your efforts. And right now, that's just Redbird Capital and whoever else is going to put money into the UFL operation. So I think it is a really hard and tough sell financially, but I'd like to see it succeed because for even selfish reasons, another professional league out there only helps the Pro Showcase, right? I mean, it's just another league that players can go from the Pro Showcase to the NFL, CFL, UFL, and whatnot. But I do think that in order to be sustainable, either at some point in time, which I believe maybe that ship has already sailed, you need to find people that want to come in and own and operate teams and kind of mitigate your risk or spread your risk out. So it's not just one single entity. That's solution number one, but that's going to take 10, 15, 20 years, right? Like what we know in this country is it takes to establish a real foothold. And I don't care what sport you're talking about, football, soccer, baseball, 20, 30 plus years. I mean, look at the WNBA, look at MLS. It took MLS about 20 years to get to a real significant, meaningful TV contract that would make them sustainable. The WNBA is still losing money after almost 30 years, right? The National Women's Soccer League just got a big TV deal recently in recent years, but they're still not dispersing any money to their individual teams. So it's a long process. So I think you bring in owners that can help kind of weather the storm during that time, or you look for somebody to subsidize your efforts, very similar to how the NBA G League thrives and how the farm system works for minor league baseball. They're not paying the player salaries. They're not paying the coaching salaries. They're not on the hook for workers' comp. And that's why those organizations can work as a developmental league. So again, I do hope for the UFL success, but I also know just how difficult it is to make it in this space.
It's tough. I mean, you look at the 2020 XFL with Vince McMahon, and obviously COVID was a factor there, but there's no guarantee that the XFL in 2020 would have survived either, even with all of
Agreed.
Money,
Yeah, I think there was some good leadership, right? I mean, I think there was some good. I think Jeff Pollock and they had Basil DeVito there for the second go round, and Basil had been.
And Oliver Luck was a tremendous commissioner, in my opinion.
No question. I think between Oliver and Jeffrey Pollock and Basil DeVito and Vince, I always admired Vince and always thought he had some great ideas in the football space. I really felt like there was, and I got a chance to work with them intimately because we did a lot of rules testing prior to their first season. And, so I thought they were onto some great stuff. I thought their kickoff format is now being used in the NFL, right? So there was some real innovation behind that effort. I do think it's hard to say that after 5 weeks of a season and they had to shut down that you'd be able to predict their future. It's kind of hard to see where would they have been in year 2 or year 3,
that's
right?
It's hard
to
say. It looked promising, but there's no guarantee that even that would have worked. Yeah, as good as it looked, So
that's right.
That just shows how volatile spring football can be. A couple more minutes here. Guys, if you have any questions for Brian, please put them in the comments now. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to get to them. But Brian, I want to give you one final question from my end. And are there any unique stories or just interesting stories that you feel like would be worth sharing based from your time in the Spring League or the USFL? Just anything interesting that might come to mind?
I mean,
I'm sure
there
there's a
were
lot.
there was a lot. I always tell people, we'll see where we net out when it's all said and done. But I always told people I felt like they should have made a documentary about the spring league. And what I mean by that is, if you go back and look since the AFL NFL merger, when you talk about broadcasted football leagues, there wasn't a single league that made it past 3 seasons. And we were one of those leagues. Granted, we were in a condensed format, but we had games on Big Boy Fox, right? They weren't just all FS1, FS2 games. We had games on broadcast television. And when it's all said and done, and you look at the amount of money that went into XFL and USFL and now UFL games and the promotion of those games, and look at some of their viewership, and then go back and look at spring league games and some of the viewership, some of our better games where we'd have close to 500,000 people viewing these games with little to no promotion.
Right.
And our league ran about $2 million a year to run, and their leagues are costing 120 to 150 million for another maybe a few 100,000 viewers. So that kind of puts things into perspective. But I always felt like somebody should do a documentary at some point, because the spring league started with little capital, next to nothing, basically. We had a few investors, and we really built it up into something from a very small scaled down league to something that was being shown on broadcast television, and didn't have all the hoopla that some of these other leagues have. And we were, sustainable. And had we not exited in 21, who knows where we would be right now, but we'd still be operational. There's no question about that. So,
and you also came into the fold like at the perfect time with your relationship with Fox Sports, in the sense of, like you said, designed for COVID. Like, it was the perfect timing. Like, I remember saying, some of those games were at absurd times, but I was up watching them. Like, they were, it was good football.
Yeah, it really was. It was good football. And I would also take the position that we had a lot of close games. Every game was coming down to the last couple of minutes, which I think always makes it exciting for fans to view. So a lot of fun memories.
You know what highlight I saw the other day, and sorry to cut you off, but it randomly stumbled, you're scrolling on Twitter or X and you just randomly come across Lucky Jackson's walk-off touchdown for the Blues on that Hail Mary from Connor Kagi.
Yeah.
A classic.
And do you know what I remember about that? When I'm sitting at home, because I didn't go to all of them. I mean, at some point, we were in 2 locations. I was going to some of the weekend games, and I'm literally on the phone with my brother, and he goes, "Oh my God, you won't believe this." Well, he had the feed quicker than mine, and so he told me, I don't want to tell you what happens, but that was a really interesting game. That was a really interesting game. Yeah.
Speaking of your brother Michael, I mean, he was the Philadelphia Stars GM there for a little while, so we got spring ball connections all over.
We do. I was, again, I tried to be the consummate big brother, and but he did very well. He did very well with that team, and the 2 young guys that I hired, him and Zach, their 2 teams ended up in the championship game in the first year, but they really put a lot of time and effort into, evaluating players and recruiting players, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun that first season. I know he enjoyed his second year with the USFL as well.
We got one great comment here, so I'll ask this real quick before we go. The USFL started, head coaches were all established older coaches. It's a league of opportunity. Do you think there is merit to the UFL hiring younger coaches instead of established coaches?
I do, and I'll tell you why that is. I believe nowadays you're dealing with a different player, and I think the older you are, there can be more of a disconnect, right, between today's player and the younger coach that maybe understands them a little better and how to motivate them. I think we're in a different time and era, and I think this is, I have conversations with Bruce Allen, former GM and team president in the NFL, and he tells me all the time that he went and visited all these training camps this summer, and the consistent messaging from these NFL teams was that the players they're getting these days, emotionally, they're just not as tough as they used to be. And so I think that having players that understand the modern player, if you will, and you're also dealing with kids that are, look at the college rosters these days. You have quarterbacks that are with their guaranteed money are making more money than some of the starting quarterbacks in the NFL, right? So it's a different sort of era that we're experiencing right now. So I do think there's some merit to having some younger coaches and trying to innovate and not get fixated. I was just able to afford some of these people because some of these guys they understood what I was trying to do, and they understood that if it was going to be sustainable, they couldn't come and ask me for $100,000 salary for 6 weeks. And
Right.
so I told them, like, look, if you're going to work in this league, here's what I can offer and here's what I can pay you. Otherwise, this does not work. And so I was fortunate to get some of the names that we got and get some of the quality coaches that came in. But at the
It
end of the
helps that they
day,
love football, like a Hal Mummy and a Jerry Glanville,
that,
and
that's exactly right. Those guys are perfect examples of guys that were in it because they enjoyed being around the game and they enjoyed working with players, and they are just the consummate coach. But the reality is, you should hire the best teachers and instructors. If you're trying to develop a product, I don't necessarily, and I think some of these other leagues have done this, and I think even going back to XFL 2.0, I think they were fixated on hiring coaches with big names. And I don't think that sells tickets. I don't necessarily think that draws it maybe gets you a couple of headlines, but I don't necessarily think that helps your product. So I think you got to have people there that are willing to not just work during the season, but also work during the off season. And I think that's the struggle right now, maybe in the current UFL, is that coaches aren't full-time. And as a matter of fact, they like that opportunity to work for, 3 or 4 months and then
Right.
go and pursue other opportunities, whether it's working, for a college team, consulting for an NFL team. And the contracts that we had in the USFL provided that. They allowed coaches, we would keep them on benefits for 12 months, but we would still allow them to pursue other opportunities, provided it was in the off season. But what did that do to us? They weren't really thinking about the USFL or the UFL nowadays, they're not thinking about the UFL in the off season. So I think that's a product, that's an issue with your consistency and continuity as it relates to your product. So maybe some of these younger guys, might be willing to put in, the 12 months out of the year type situation, and it might help with the product. So,
And not only that, I mean, look at the NFL. I mean, you've got Sean McVays and Kevin O'Connell's and
sure.
Kyle Shanahan's and younger guys who have come in and transformed the NFL. I mean, they've won Super Bowls and they've come in and done a tremendous job. So, no, I completely agree. I mean, it's a league of opportunity. You have at least a spot or two open for a younger guy, for sure. But
100%.
Brian, I appreciate you taking the time. I know the ProShowcase.com is probably the best place for players or whoever might be watching to go check things out. Where should they go? ProShowcase.com, I assume?
That's right. The ProShowcase.com. We're on social media at the Pro Showcase, TikTok, Instagram, X, formerly Twitter. So that's where they can stay up to date with the Pro Showcase news. We'll be announcing around December 1st. We'll be making the announcement with respect to our LA showcase that will be happening in February. And we're looking for a big event then as well. So
That's really exciting news to hear, Brian. Appreciate you coming on again. And I see we got a question from MadMill49. Is Brian hiring people and player personnel?
we could be.
All right.
But I'm more of a seasonal hire type person right now. No full-time gigs just yet, but maybe
Sounds
soon.
good.
Maybe soon. Yeah.
Well, Brian, thanks again for joining. Wishing you the best and excited to see what the future holds for the Pro Showcase.
You got it, James. It was a lot of fun this evening, and thanks for having me on.
Of course. Take care, Brian. Thank you.
Take care. See you.
I will stick on for just a moment here with our live viewers. Brian, are you still there? Actually, you know what? We're wrapping up.